Link Joker was never a clan I gravitated towards because of its playstyle, and I didn't have much fun with that. But with these past couple of weeks, I've had the opportunity to give Star Vaders a chance in V Premium. In today's video, I will be showcasing you guys my take on Star Vaders in the current format of Cardfight Vanguard V Premium. I never liked the idea of locking my opponent out the game. I love control decks, but this is like always taking it to another level. It's probably because I played Star Vaders back in the Limit Break era, so I remember just like how OP that was. That is definitely not the case with this deck. There are some things I want to discuss about this deck. I definitely don't think that the lock factor is OP in V Premium. We have a lot of outs, we have a lot of decks that can get past it, but I will admit that this is still a really fun control deck that does maintain what made Link Joker back all the way in Limit Break, and it still has some unique gimmicky effects that still throw off your opponent. And if you approach this deck correctly and you pay attention to the combos that the deck has and you learn your cards, you can definitely, steal some matches with this deck. Do I think it's meta? Absolutely not. I'll tell you that now. But I do think that if you were somebody that enjoyed Link Joker back in the day, this deck is definitely going to give you that old feeling of locking down your opponent and playing by yourself. We will now head on over to camera 2 and get this deck profile started. But before we do that, if you enjoy seeing content like this, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Do not forget to hit the notification bell for you guys to be up to date on my newest videos coming out. Alright you guys, to get into it, I am playing 3 copies of Star Vader Nebula Lord Dragon. This card is so cool looking, and one of my favorite Link Joker units of all time. Quick side note, I actually played this deck way back in Limit Break. I haven't touched it since, obviously, because it's not good anymore, but it was just my favorite unit. I didn't like Chaos Breaker, couldn't afford it at the time, so I went for his second best option, which was Nebula Lord Dragon. However, today, Nebula Lord Dragon is ready to redeem its name. Now, Nebula Lord has 2 effects. Act Vanguard Circle once per turn. Soul Blast, retire one of your rear guards with Star Vader in its card name. Your opponent chooses one of their rear guards and locks it. Then, if your opponent's back row has no rear guards, this unit gets Drive +1 until end of turn. If no units were locked, your opponent looks at the top card of their deck and puts it on an open rear guard circle as a locked card. Continuous Vanguard Circle. During your turn, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, all of your units with Star Vader in their card name gets power plus 5,000 for each of your opponent's locked cards. Now, Nebula Lord Dragon, I love and hate this card. The first effect is incredible. You Soul Blast 1, retire something. I don't know why we had to retire something that sucks, but it is what it is. And then you get to lock one of your opponent's units, as it should, and then if your opponent has no back row units, you get Drive +1. If no units were locked, you get to lock something to your opponent's rearguard circle. That's really huge. A lot of decks right now in V get rid of their own board. They can play around this effect by clearing out their front row. A lot of decks can just get around this ability. It's nice that we do have a Vanguard, however, that does give them a lock if they choose not to do anything, so that we can use all of its effects to accumulate the triple drive as well as the 5k power. And the 5k power is very important, as since we are a Force deck and you have access to Force 1, Force 2, being able to accumulate a Force 2, particularly I've realized on the Vanguard Circle, means that they have to deal with a triple drive Vanguard that has a crit on it every single turn, and that makes it a lot scarier. I think that the value of Nebula Lord Dragon is better in the later game, hence the reason why we are only playing 3 of it, despite it being the main card of the deck, because we do have to make space for 2 other big boys in Star Vader to get this deck to work. The locking, the power increase, as well as the fact that you have access to Force 1 or Force 2 and the triple drive makes Nebula Lord a very scary control Vanguard. Formatics grade 3, I am playing 3 copies of Star Vader Chaos Breaker Dragon. I can finally afford to play this guy now, but no, on a serious note, Chaos Breaker Dragon is your ideal first ride target. Playing this deck, I've realized that because you can't use Nebula Lord's power-up skill, which is like its most important factor outside of the lock, going first, you're going to want to ride into something going first. And there are 2 options here. The first one is Chaos Breaker Dragon. This card is very important for your XL matchups. XL is probably like the scariest matchup for Link Joker because you don't have enough ways to lock all of their stuff. There's no such thing as like a full board lock in V Chaos Breaker. It's just physically impossible. The effect of Chaos Breaker, though, to remove markers and accumulate cards, now that's important. Being on Chaos Breaker as a Vanguard going into first turn means that you can set up your locks, knock out those Excel markers, knock out those protects, knock out those forces, and then finally go into Nebula Lord Dragon to push for the game. You're usually going to accumulate about 2 markers on here. You'll go force 1 or force 2 depending on the matchup. Sometimes certain matchups require different things. The retire and the draw does help because you get to, knock out pieces, draw cards. They'll have no rear guards, or they'll have not enough rear guards to use for Nebula or Dragon, which means that you'll be able to finally get the triple drive, power, as well as accumulate extra force markers, making your attacks even scarier. This card also serves as a really strong rear guard unit, as if your opponent has something locked, he gets +10, Nebula gives +5. So on its own, it becomes a 28k beat stick, and then with a force 1, it becomes a 38k beat stick, which is a really scary number against all archetypes of decks. However, when Chaos Breaker Dragon isn't the answer, we have one other option. Introducing our next grade 3 Star Vader, 2 copies of Infinite Zero Dragon. Now, Star Vader Infinite Zero Dragon is still keeping up its Break Ride effect. When placed on Vanguard Circle or rode upon, you counterblast 1 and discard a card from your hand. Choose one of your opponent's rear guards and lock it. If your damage zone has 4 or more cards, choose 1 rear guard from your opponent's front row and back row instead. Continuous Vanguard rear guard circle during your turn. This unit gets 5k for each of your opponent's lock cards. In matchups where Chaos Breaker Dragon can be good is usually 9 times out of 10. However, if your opponent is pushing you really hard and you go into like 4 damage into your first grade 3 turn, or if you're going to be playing against a rush deck that's like Excel, this ends up becoming a better option. And the main reason being is because since it locks something in the front row and the back row, you give yourself 2 cards to lock with, and the effects of your other units can give you 2 to 1 more lock in the same turn, therefore giving you a 1 or 2 turn pivot. Also, Infinite Zero Dragon along with Nebula or Dragon is the only way you can accumulate 3 to 5 locks max in a turn to unlock Nebula's full power. Now, the 5 locks is very rare. It requires another key piece outside of this and this, but it is possible. It's only happened to me once. Infinite Zero Dragon gives you the time to pivot, accumulate force markers, set your Nebula Dragon up, and set your Chaos Breaker Dragon up too. It's one of the best things to go to when you need time to just pivot the game, slow it down, get more cards to your hand, and then go into one of these because your Chaos Breaker, along with this, gives you 3 locks and gives you 3 card draw, 6 marker removal, or goes with this, which gives you 3 locks, which gives you 15,000 power, triple drive, and then if you're going on the Force 2 at that point with this, you'll have 2 Force 2 on 2 very powerful attacks. It's just a really good setup piece, again, to extend the game until you can get into one of these, depending on what your matchup is like. It's also another very strong rearguard piece on either one of their turns because, again, this is another unit that accumulates power when something is locked. So like Chaos Breaker, it'll go up to a good number on a Force 1 and also go to a good number and be scarier on a Force 2. For my last grade 3, I am playing 2 copies of Nordstrom Dragon. In this deck, we do use a lot of Counterblast, Chaos cost CB, Infinite Zero cost CB. We have other effects that cost Counterblast, therefore it's important to play some form of Countercharge. Moving on to my grade 2s, I play 4 of the most important card in the deck, Bisection Star Vader Zychronium. Now, Zychronium is the only other card in the deck outside of your Vanguard that actually directly locks something. Everything else in this deck will lock something, but it requires end of turn skill or when they unlock, something of that nature. And that's really annoying to deal with because if you need an immediate lock, Bisection Star Vader Zychronium is the only card that can do this. Forcing your opponent to lock stuff in the back row while this card gives you the option of getting power and draw or not doing anything but preventing one of your opponent's attacks is very annoying for a lot of players to deal with. It shuts down a lot of the rush strategy that most decks have, cutting away their attacks, especially in the early game against Excel decks, therefore giving you the chance to live longer or set up for one of these, depending on how the matchup is going. Moving on to my next grade 2, I play 4 copies of Star Vader Colony Maker. Star Vader Colony Maker is your piece to dig out for other Star Vader pieces. This is how you find your Craving Claws, your Zychroniums, your Beatstick pieces, whatever you need. If your stuff is locked on your opponent's end, you get to Superior Call that unit as standing, giving you a bit of a push. And the fact that this card is a Soul Blast is a bit annoying, but it means that we can again use our Counterblast for other things. However, this is how you dig your deck out for other Star Vader pieces to keep hitting your opponent in the early game. Star Vaders is actually kind of a weird little rush deck because you have cards that search out other Star Vaders, they have on-hit effects, they can dig for other pieces. Star Vaders do a lot. Colony Maker is just really good. I love the fact that it can call out pieces and give you extra chances to dig for cards when attacking. For my next grade 2, I play only 2 copies of Unrivaled Star Vader Radon. Now, Unrivaled Star Vader Radon is a Star Vader with the effect to revive itself if you have 1 or less cards in your soul. This is actually pretty important because in this deck, you will not accumulate a lot of soul outside of a couple of card effects and riding into new grade 3s. So therefore, Radon being a free body on board when you have 1 or less soul, that does come up a lot towards the end of the game. And now for my grade 1s, I play 4 copies of Star Vader Craving Claw. The saving grace of Star Vader in general, Craving Claw gives you the on-hit pressure that this deck needs. Being able to use the on-hit pressure and check the top 5 for your Star Vader unit is incredible. You can search out the Zychroniums, grade 3s, whatever you need. The second effect does come up a lot, which is the ability to move this card into the soul. You unlock one of your opponent's cards and then lock something outside of the lock unit. With Chaos Breaker, it activates the combo, Chaos Breaker, Zychronium, give yourself the 2 front row lock, and then use this to go ahead, unlock, and just get the markers off them right away to accumulate it for your turn. Basic combo, really important for Chaos Breaker on those turns. However, with other cards, it's actually important as well. Because with Nebula Lord, since Nebula Lord requires the back row to be locked, sometimes you do have to use the Craving Claw to lock the back row if it is full, to make sure that you can get those triple drive and accumulate the other power on the ability. For my next grade 1, I am playing 4 copies of Prison Gate Star Vader Palladium. Now, Prison Gate Star Vader Palladium is another lock piece that we have in the deck. This card actually calls itself out when rode upon, therefore giving you a booster throughout the entirety of the match or an extra attacker in the early game. However, its second effect is the most important because when one of your opponent's card is unlocked, you get to counterblast 1, retire this unit, and then you get to lock something from the top card of your opponent's deck to an open circle. Now, just like Zychronium, this is another card that locks from the top deck, just like Nebula does the same thing. Therefore, this is another card that helps you accumulate more cards onto their actual board for decks that do not already commit a lot of board or they just retire their stuff on their own. Palladium can just force them to give them a body onto the board if you've already set up 1 lock and they want to get rid of it on their own turn via other card effects or whatever they may have. 3 copies of Lady Battler of the White Dwarf. This is your grade 3 searcher. It searches out your Heal Guardians and your Nordstrom Dragon because counter charge is important, and so are Heal Guardians. And then for my last piece, and this is currently a tech right now, I have been enjoying it, but it is cuttable. I am playing 2 copies of Crunching Deleter Barial. Now, Crunching Deleter Barial has the following ability of, when placed Soul Blast 1, and your opponent cannot turn his cards face up during his or her next end phase. This includes unlock and counter charge. Now, this effect has actually been really huge in most games. The unlocking effect, preventing them from doing that, means that if you're on Infinite Zero, or if you're on your Chaos Breaker or Nebula Lord Dragon, and you need more time to pivot, this card does that. It will keep stuff locked and gives you more time to accumulate more locks via other card effects like Craving Claw, Palladium, or any of your other Star Vader units, as well as the fact that with Burial, if you use it on an Infinite Zero turn, or again Chaos Breaker or Infinite Zero, and you go into Nebula, since they'll have no rear guards, they accumulate more cards from the top of their deck as locked, giving more power to all of your stuff. And now for triggers, in this deck I do play a total of 7 critical with 4 Asteroid Wolf, 1 Axino Dragon, 5 draw with Beloved Theory Child, 4 of the draw PGs Cosmo Wreath, 4 of the Heal Guardians Oblivion Quasar Dragon, and to keep up with the theme of the deck, I'm playing 1 copy of Star Vader Dusttail Unicorn. Now, this is my take on Star Vaders, guys. I really don't think this deck is that strong right now. I think that it's very unique, it's very gimmicky. The lock is definitely really annoying for your protect and your force matchups, but a lot of decks just know how to play around this. A lot of decks, the best decks are clearing their boards. Anj destroys this deck because it can bounce back its rearguard circles, and while you can use the effects of your stuff to lock, Zychronium is the most important piece of this deck. This is the only card that locks from the top deck, therefore triggering the effects of your other cards, even get them going, because if you don't have any way of locking your opponent's stuff, this deck becomes terrible. But with that being said, tell me your thoughts on Nebula Lord Dragon below. How can I improve this deck? What are your thoughts about the deck? And that's pretty much a wrap on this one, guys. Thank you so much for staying tuned. I'll catch you later. Peace.